Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new, very special episode of Second Take Cinema. We are honoured today to have been asked by Sunrise Films and Vertigo Releasing to do an early preview of one of their new movies that is coming out soon, but it's not out yet. This is similar to when we did the thing for Hammer Horror with Mr. Jekyll or Dr. Jekyll. Dr. Jekyll it was called.
Yeah.
Where we were sent the film a couple of weeks before it came out and asked to do a review of it. They've blessed us by giving us the same opportunity, which is wonderful. So today we are talking about The Girl in the Trunk, which releases in the UK and Ireland, the USA and Canada on digital download and streaming. I believe it's on Apple TV Plus, I think.
Oh, okay.
On the 28th of May, 2024. The movie runs 90 minutes. It's rated 15. Written and directed by Jonas Kvist Jensen and starring Katarina Spora and Casper Philipson. This is a tense, low-budget thriller, and I'm going to read you the synopsis right here so you have an idea of what the film is about. A woman finds herself kidnapped and entrapped in the enclosed space of a speeding car's trunk, wearing her wedding dress and with her phone as the only available tool. The situation deteriorates gradually as a failed escape attempt costs the life of an innocent bystander. With the clock ticking towards a slow death from heat exhaustion in the Texas desert, a psychotic kidnapper at the wheel, Amanda is forced to make her own luck in the end. A dangerous game of questions and deadly consequences to be played over the phone with the mysterious kidnapper seems the only way to maybe discover his true identity. Getting help or simply fighting her painful way towards a fleeting chance of escape. So, as you can probably guess from the limited cast list and the synopsis we've just read out, this is the sort of film that's usually right down my alley.
Yeah.
It's mostly one location, very limited cast, about someone trapped in a situation that they want to not be trapped in, and the film is chronicling that journey. I'm a big fan of films that are like this.
Yeah.
Misery perhaps being the ultimate example.
Misery's great. I also really love The Sunset Limited with
Sunset
Samuel
Limited.
Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, Frozen, not the Disney one, the Adam Green film Frozen, which involves people trapped on a ski lift.
Yep.
Great film.
Gary Glen Ross is not quite the same, but it is a very limited cast in very few locations. 12 Angry Men's probably a better example, actually.
Yep.
Even though it's a bigger cast, it's 12 members of cast, they are all stuck in one location, having to deliberate something.
Yep.
In that case, it's justice, but in this case, obviously, it's the main character's survival.
And I've loved stuff like this right back to like Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah. It's one of those things. It's almost a bit like when you watch TV. Big TV shows, certainly they used to, have bottle episodes where it's like, look, we don't really have much budget for this one. There's no real special effects. You've got to kind of use mostly pre-used sets, maybe have one or two guest characters, but for the most part, you're stuck with your main cast, all in pretty much one location. Those usually end up being the best episodes because basically it's the writers just go to town developing character plots. And for me, one of the main things that I come to film for is the character drama and the inter-character drama. So something like this, again, just by its premise, it starts off strong. It starts off strongly with woman trapped in the trunk of a car and her kidnapper. And what is their relation to each other? What is their relationship going to develop into? And how is she going to get out of it?
Let's start with...
Shall we start with the premise?
Yeah, let's start with the basic bones of the plot. We're going to try not to spoil anything in this review because obviously the film is not out yet. It's a solid premise.
Yeah, I love the premise.
I think the premise is really good. I think where the film stumbles slightly for me is there isn't a very convincing... The dynamic between the girl and the guy who's kidnapped her.
Yeah.
It never feels that dynamic. and it never feels like he's that dangerous.
There are points where he introduces his danger. Again, not to spoil too much, but there are points where he puts things in the boot with her to increase the danger. There are also, we see him assault other people in order to protect his obvious secret of having her trapped in the boot of the car. So he is clearly dangerous, and he is most likely very dangerous to her. Even on the phone, he talks about he doesn't do things like essentially sexual assault or worse, but he has a friend who would be into that.
Yeah.
So there's all this sort of much more implied violence, even if it's not necessarily death. There is a lot of implied violence, but there's something about the dynamic that I don't know. With something like 12 Angry Men, the inter-character drama builds quite strongly. I think one of the main issues with this is that kind of builds in 12 Angry Men because each of the men are eye to eye, whereas with this, even though it is only two people in a very enclosed location, they don't really see each other much. And that's kind of part of the mystery. She's trying to find out what his face is so that she can try and figure out who he is. But at the same token, it kind of blocks a little bit of the dynamic between them, I think. Another good example, actually, from completely left field, is Collateral. Because that's, again, it's mostly two men in a car. But their dynamic between Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx is really striking because they are constantly grinding on each other. One is a killer, one is not. So, and realistically, Jamie Foxx is kidnapped by Tom Cruise in that film. So actually, that's probably a very good parallel film for comparison's sake. Obviously, the intimation is different because Jamie Foxx showed his hand at being a bit corrupt by taking the gig. But it's, I think the lack of face-to-face communication maybe hurts a little bit of that dramatic build.
I think the other problem you've got, and I'm going to try and say this without spoiling the ending, but I'm going to say this because I think it will help people enjoy the film more, because if they're not expecting it. In a film like this, I would expect that when the villain's motives are revealed, that it would tie in somehow to the heroine's arc.
Yeah, we get a lot about her, don't we? Like, straight from the off. Let's just say the things that we know literally from the intro, not what we learn later on. She's at a car rental place, in a wedding dress, on her own, not with someone, and she's hired a car that is basically designed to be driven one way, dropped off at an alternate dealer's lot, and then driven back by some lackey. She just drops it off in whatever city she's going to and essentially abandons it with the dealership. So whatever she's doing, she's going one way. Wherever she's going, she's doing it in a wedding dress and she's doing it alone. So there's actually quite a lot you can intimate about who she is, where she's going, or where she's come from, purely from the intro. Yeah. And you're right. Usually, your first thought is to sit there and go, okay, so she's clearly been at a wedding. She's wearing a wedding dress, so she's probably the bride, and your mind immediately starts thinking, who is he in relation to her wedding, maybe?
Well, the fact that for her character, as the film goes on, we learn more and more about her backstory. Yeah. Because that's the central thread of the film, you expect the villain to tie into that.
Yeah.
But they've chosen to go more for a sort of, it could happen to anyone feel.
Yeah, the problem with the it could happen to anyone vibe is the story they pick logically works, which is the reason he picks her is because she's in the wedding dress, and if she's run away from a wedding, it's unlikely she's paid for it, so the likelihood is that whoever has paid for it has money to get her back with. The problem is that then negates that it could happen to anyone. Because you've got to be rich. Because realistically, you've got to be in that scenario for him to pick you. So, unless you're, a rich daddy's girl enough to be able to have someone pay for your wedding, going for the it could happen to you doesn't work. Yeah. I think that's the only thing that kind of dents the central premise. Because he doesn't tie into her, and it relies solely on her backstory being accessible. I mean, there's one bit where she asks Daddy for $100,000. He just goes, "Fine, I'll get the money." And you're like, "Well, my dad can't get $100,000 for me. Well, that's not going to happen."
Yeah,
for me.
I mean, Oh, I don't think I should say it 'cause it's a bit of a spoiler, but when the dad comes into the film a bit later on, and the way he comes into the film, it's just like, well, this man is fabulously rich.
Yeah.
Like,
So let's talk a little bit about that. How he enters. I don't think it's a spoiler, is it? Really? He comes in. He comes in a helicopter.
Yeah.
That's not really a spoiler, but you are right. It does show that he is, snort cocaine off a titty rich. The man is very wealthy. And what I would say is I think the film makes some good choices in its premise, and I think it sometimes wastes those good choices with things that are not necessary. So the dad coming in the helicopter requires CGI. The CGI doesn't hold up.
None of the CGI needed to be in this.
No,
film.
and to be fair, there's no reason why it wouldn't have worked more impactfully, to be honest, if it had actually been another car that she could see through. Because she can only see everything that's happening behind the car because she's managed to break the lock on the boot, and essentially there's a hole she can look through. And that's how we see the helicopter. It's also how we see other vehicles or some other characters sometimes. It would have probably been more impactful if the dad had tried to run him off the road in another vehicle or a truck or something like that. Something you could actually get a hold of as a practical object. Because the problem with the CGI is, A, it doesn't hold up, but B, at this budget level, I'll be honest, it was never going to hold up. Most CGI doesn't hold up on big budget Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
And you're expecting to do that on let's be honest, what must be a near enough zero budget.
Yeah, honestly, I know this might be controversial, but I have a fairly firm stance on if you are a low-budget movie, you should never do CGI, ever.
I agree.
Because it's just not possible to make it look
Unless
good.
it's the point, but you've really got to have something going in order to make that work.
My good point for this film is I like the use of the popped out lock.
Yes.
They use it to film when the first person gets killed.
Yeah, it's this guy called Dale, isn't it? He's a hunter, a Southern American not Southern American, Texan. I always get confused because it's Southern American states, but not South America. Yeah, that's my bad.
And that's an interesting.
That's a really good POV.
It's an interesting way of doing that scene.
Yeah.
Because you can do it. It's clearly been done cheap, but the fact you're doing it from that interesting perspective hides the fact that it's been done cheap.
The other thing as well... Sorry.
Because it's interesting and not the sort of angle you see every day.
Yeah, and again, with something that is horror, and this isn't like a slasher film or a hardcore horror, but it is a tension-based film, and that is the horrific moment when certain things happen through that eye hole. The benefit of that is that you are restricting the frame, and that is how horror normally works best. If you've got a monster, you hide the monster. If you need to show something, you limit the audience's field of view, and that way it keeps them more on the edge. These are all great ideas. And actually, the idea of a character who's stuck in the boot, I really liked.
Oh, I love the idea. The idea's phenomenal.
There's a couple of things I think they could have done differently to maybe help with that one-on-one face-to-face time. There is a certain period of the film where she's trying to figure out what he looks like. For that point, it's fine. However, a bit later, there is a point where essentially we know what he looks like. She's got it on her phone, and we didn't get to see his face a bit more. Most rear car seats will have like a fold down middle seat, which sometimes you can see through to the boot. So having something like that, so there's like a face hole, so you could film from, more his perspective in the car. Not a lot, but just a little bit. That would allow your actors to have a bit of time to play off each other, rather than just being voiceover for each other. I think that would have maybe helped build some of the tension, some of the relationship, because at the end of the day, what ends up happening is she just ends up screaming at a fourth wall for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I like how they illuminated the boot. I thought that was cool as well, because bear in mind, obviously, she's locked in a boot in the middle of the night. The boot is closed. There is no entrance way to, as I say, there is no middle seat folded down for her to interact with the driver. It's all done via a mobile phone. So in the boot, there are almost like emergency red lights.
Yeah.
I don't know if those are real in cars, but you know what? I forgive it because of the premise.
I figured because of where they were that they were like the backs of the brake lights.
Possible, but I actually think they're meant to be... I don't know if they actually fit these, but they kind of had the feel to me as like, if you do get locked, because he mentions it, there is an interior release for the boot, which he has conveniently removed. So obviously, it's quite possible that most boots now, or at least some boots, have they consider, if you are kidnapped, it gives the person inside a way out. Or if you get trapped in your own boot somehow. I don't know how that would happen. But yeah, and the boot of the car is believable, and that's important. I know it sounds kind of small potatoes, but that's very important since we spend 90% of the film there. That the boot, because it's clearly a set, because of how far back the camera is and how big that boot is compared to its exterior shots, which I'll forgive because, let's be honest, I care more about the storytelling and how that's done than, hang on, it's about 20% bigger. Who cares? So yeah, as far as that is concerned as a set, I thought that was very good. And they do a very good job of hiding the fact that it's clearly not filmed in America.
Yes.
Because they're all Danish actors, with a couple of them have been dubbed by Americans, I think, but they're pretty much all Danish actors from what I've seen on the IMDb. I very much doubt they had the budget to travel everyone to America just to do some car shots.
Yeah, I would imagine
so. So they've probably seen what cars they have in Denmark and that are also sold in America, bought those cars and then bought custom number plates, which is a great idea because, and let's be honest, again, from that very limited perspective through the keyhole, driving at night, you can conceal the fact that you're not in America very easily.
I feel the only reason I can think of if all your cast and crew are Danish, and the plot isn't something that necessarily has to be in America, the only thing I can think of that is the reason that they've set it in America is to help with the marketability of it.
Yeah, I think...
But the thing is, they've compromised the performance of their actors. There are several scenes where the actors are incredibly flat, and it's because they are wrestling with hiding their Danish accents.
I have to say that the worst performers in this, I felt, weren't actually the main girl, and that wasn't the main guy. It was the ones who were dubbed. I don't know why, but the two American voices that are dubbing over, there's her dad, who is played by a Danish man, but is dubbed over by an American. Okay. And then there's the guy she ran away from that day, like at the wedding. He's on the phone at one or 2 points. He is dubbed in by an American. They're the worst performers in it. Like, obviously, they're not wrestling with an accent. I'm not sure if they're professional actors, or it might just be that they're not particularly great actors. I don't know.
Maybe.
But the performance, I felt that their performance stood out to me as the worst part of it. Bearing in mind as well that when we hear the dad, even though we see him physically, like his body, there's very few points where they have to actually dub him over. Because of a limited field of view, we don't actually see her dad talking visibly for a lot of the film. A lot of it is still on the phone, or we, just through little glimpses through the little eye holes that she manages to get for herself. I have to mention one prop. I'm sorry.
But the baton.
Yeah, so the police baton, at one point a cop pulls them over and loses the baton in the boot of the car. I won't really reveal any more about that because it could be considered spoilers. Guys, this baton, it's a $2 toy baton that you'd get at like some corner shop. It's like when she puts it through the boot, you can see it's vacuum formed. You can see the plastic lip all the way around the outside, like where it's been sealed. If you're gonna do that, it's one of those things where I understand it's low budget film. You had to, maybe not everyone has access to a police baton. That's understandable. Use something else. maybe a big torch or, that they might have on them or something. Just honestly, or just cover up the seal because it looked so plastic. It's the one thing that as soon as I saw it took me straight out of the film. I'm like, why has this person bought a costume baton?
So the film has some interesting themes to it, at least I felt, where it's trying to get beyond just a thriller of a woman stuck in a trunk.
It's trying to have a slightly bigger message than that.
Yeah, I felt the film was trying to do a message about the way women are treated like objects or pawns in the lives of men.
Okay.
Because, obviously, first of all, she's been kidnapped.
Yeah, by a man.
By a man, who we eventually learn, as you said, it's not a personal reason, it's just, I can use you to make money. Then, there's a couple of points in the film where she manages to get in touch with men in her life, her dad and her would-be husband.
Yeah, it's interesting she never gets in contact with any women.
It is, yes, good point. And both the men she gets in touch with, don't listen to her when she's trying to talk to them.
Yeah, they're too busy with themselves, really.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit I can't talk about because it's a spoiler, but there's a bit with her dad where he really should have just listened to her and things would have worked out better. But all of the blokes that she speaks to, they don't seem to really care about how she's doing. It's this sort of, they jump straight to this, has he touched you thing.
And it doesn't seem to be implied that they're worried about her health as such.
Yeah.
More so is it, has he soiled you, for lack of a better term.
And then there's this, as you pointed out to me, there's like an obsession with them on, oh, well, how's this going to reflect on me?
Yeah.
How's this going to impact my life that you've been kidnapped?
Yeah, the dad, one of the first things that he talks about is like, when he starts getting angry about the kidnapping, one of the things that he mentions is, this guy thinks he can take the piss out of me, he can do this to me, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you're not the one in the car, man. Like, what the hell? And then the lover, or ex-lover, he does the same. It's like, you have no idea how bad this makes me feel.
Yeah.
And it's like she's having to take on responsibility for how hurt they are.
Yeah.
While she is actively in danger.
It's a bit relevant at the minute, given there's a bit of an online discourse at the minute, isn't there?
Yes.
With this, would you rather be in the woods with a man or a bear? And lots of women are choosing the bear. And a lot of men, instead of asking the question and looking in at themselves and saying, well, oh shit, like, what have we done? What society have we created that is making the women feel this way? And addressing that problem, a lot of men are just crying about it online.
Well, a lot of men are just
moaning.
like going, well, you know how dangerous bears are, right? Bears are bad.
But yeah, it's interesting that this film has come out. I'm not saying it was pre-planned this way, because they obviously would have had to, this would have been in post-production at least by the time this happened.
I think it actually connects to something that's been said for a couple of years, that women online have sort of been talking about, whether rightly or wrongly. I'm not going to wade into with a political argument, but there's been a talk about emotional labour.
Right.
In a relationship, the reason that women, even if men do 50% of the chores and things like that, women still feel that they do more, is this thing called emotional labour. So, I still have to be the one to remember the birthdays, or I still have to be the one who, I don't know, or I have to take care of him. So, like, it's infantilizing men as well, because it's like I have to treat the man like another child.
That's really interesting, and this isn't the right podcast for this discussion.
No. I wasn't trying to make a political debate either.
But yeah, I thought it was an interesting idea, and it shows ambition on the filmmaker's part.
Yes.
To try and take this, what would normally be quite a cookie-cutter standard genre at this point,
and
put this additional theme over the top.
Yes, I think I think it should have dealt with it a little bit more than it did. I think it kind of feels like it's just kind of an overlay in some scenes. So we never really get the chance to fully chew over the concept and how it relates to the scenario. But I do really appreciate the fact that it's there because it gives the film this extra element. Yeah, and as you say, it makes the filmmaker seem like he's got more to give than would otherwise be visible in a film about a straight-up kidnapping.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so it was interesting to see. I think the guys have done a good job. To be honest, I'd love to know, if one of them wants to get in touch, I'd love to know what the thought process was behind the decision to set it in America. But yeah, so I'm glad to see Danish filmmakers getting a platform, which is great. I'd love to see more European film. I just would love to know why they chose that. I'd be interested in knowing.
I think just to curtail back to your point of just to round back to your point on whether or not, or what the reason was behind setting it in America. If the argument was, that it would sell better in English language in America, and that's obviously a much bigger market than Europe and the UK, etc. At the moment, there seems to be a boom of Scandinavian media content. There's obviously, you've got Remedy's Alan Wake 2 has made a big splash. There's been a rise of Scandinavian dramas on Netflix.
Scandi Noir, as they call it.
Scandi Noir, yeah. So that seems to be on the rise. So even I do wonder if in future it may be better for this particular team with budgets that are this small to just make them have them talk English so that's easier to sell in the West. Fine, I get that, but we don't care about the accents. So long as they're led...
This is the interesting bit. Maybe we don't care about the accents, but actually...
But if Scandi Noir is getting popular, and that is actually
but it's only getting popular in this country.
Is it not popular in America?
Not like it is here. And this is what I'm saying.
What about Alan Wake, though? Because that would be a Scandi Noir. It's just a Scandi Noir game,
and as everyone keeps pointing out, Alan Wake 2 hasn't made its budget back yet.
To be fair, that's because it's got an insane budget.
It hasn't for a AAA game, though.
For a AAA game, but as you said, it was the most expensive thing Finland has ever made.
Yeah.
So, I can't imagine that this film had that level of budget.
No.
So if you keep the budget lower, the amount of sales you need to make to recoup your costs is less as well. Maybe move into the Scandi Noir subset rather than try and be American.
Yeah, I definitely hope we see something from this team again.
Yeah.
It's really hard to make an indie film, even a film like this, where in theory you've only got a handful of actors. It's still insanely difficult, not just budgetary wise, but scheduling wise, practicality wise, making the continuity, things like that. I don't think people realise a lot of the time how difficult making films can be.
Yeah.
Not that they are asking for my advice, and not that I really have any right to give any advice. But if I were to give advice, my advice would be that they did not need any of the CGI in this film. I don't need the CGI creepy crawlies. I don't need the CGI helicopter.
CGI helicopter was definitely not needed. I'm not sure I like the idea of one of the creepy crawlers.
Every single one of those things lowered the tension for me.
See, the first creepy crawly, I think would have raised the tension really well had it not been CGI. So I think the concept was fine. I think the execution balked it. I could understand why they went CGI on it because of the type of creature it was.
Anyway, that's The Girl in the Trunk, releasing 28th of May across the UK.
And it's not about an elephant.
No. Releasing across the UK, Ireland, Canada, and the USA on digital download. Thank you so much to Sunrise and Vertigo for asking us to do an early review of this movie. We were very grateful. Thank you very much, and we will see you all next time for more Second Take Cinema.